بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين صلى الله على سيدنا مولانا محمد وبارك وسلم عليه السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Last week we were going through the issue of free will. Just to wrap up, and we'll go through some more explanation. What's the summary of the discussion? To summarize, the Maturidis and the Mu'tazila believe that there is wisdom in the actions of Allah. Okay, however, Ash'aris don't agree. For them, Allah is free of motives, objectives, and wisdom, in a sense. So for them, when they say, how can you bind or oblige Allah to His wisdom? They say, when we talk about wisdom, wisdom is about doing the best course of action, basically. Allah's knowledge is perfect, so it's already subsumed in Allah's knowledge. So whatever He's going to do is going to be perfect anyway. But to say Allah is obliged to do things in a particular way because we say so, or we think wisdom necessitates, they don't agree with that. They say Allah is free to do whatever He wants to do. Okay, so that's the kind of therefore they kind of say there's no motives. Allah has no motives. That's like creation. Okay, He has no objectives and wisdom. Like He's not bound by any of these things. Allah is independent. He has no needs. He does things free of motives. And how can we oblige Allah to be doing things with wisdom all the time if He feels like He doesn't have to? They don't deny Allah's wisdom, that He has an attribute of wisdom, but to say that necessarily everything has to be done with wisdom, who are we to say that? For example, if Allah just wants to punish a pious worshipper and send him to hellfire, what wisdom are you talking about? If He wants to, He can. Aqlan, intellectually, is possible. Shar'i wise, will He do that? They actually said no, because Allah said in the Quran. Only because He said no, He won't do it. But aqlan, is it possible? Yeah, it's possible, they say. But the difference between them and the Maturidis and Mu'tazila, they say no, even aqlan, it's not, because they're obliging Allah to His wisdom. His wisdom will necessitate it. This is a subtle difference between the two on this issue. Wisdom to hold someone accountable for something they had no choice over. Whereas Ash'aris say that you are Allah's property, so He can do what He wills, and it won't be injustice on His part. Ash'aris are like Jabris in this matter. Remember, with Qadaris and Jabris, the two opposite spectrums. And Ash'aris are like Jabris in this matter, but it is not extreme, as they have a concept of kasb, which makes them slightly different to Jabris. They further say you are accountable for the male, which is termed as strong intention, like azm. So remember, both Maturidis and Ash'aris believe that we acquire the deed. We don't create the deed. Who creates? Only Allah is the creator of everything, right? We acquire the deed. The Maturidis and Mu'tazila say Allah has deposited a power in it with which we acquire, which we utilize, and we acquire the deed. So because we are responsible for that power that's deposited within us, which creates the action. But Allah is the one who's put the cause and effect in that power. So He gave us a certain power which has a certain effect. We utilize that, but Allah is the ultimate creator of everything. So our power has what? Effect. Cause, effect. Okay? This is what the whole discussion is about. Right? So this is what they say. And as a result of that cause that we exercise, we acquire the effect, which is the kasb. Okay? They both believe in Maturidi that that's what the disagreement is. Okay, so the disagreement is, okay, does your will have an effect? Does your will have a deposited deposit that has an effect? And as a result of that, we are now responsible for the act. They will say, no, you don't have your will. There is no cause. So the actually will say there is no cause effect. So your power, your qudra has no effect. لا تأثير, they say. It has no effect. So because you just an illusion that this power that you have with which you do things, you think you're using it. You think you're triggering things. In reality, Allah is making you move and everything. Every single moment is created, and then that is destroyed, and then to the next one, and to the next one, like cartoon frames and all that. Okay, frames per second, whatever you call it. That's how they view life. That's how they view the universe. Okay, so therefore, your power that you're saying that is deposited has no effect really. There is no cause, there is no effect. But then, what are you accountable for then? You see, the question that comes from the Maturidis and the Mu'tazilah is, so can you please tell me what are we accountable for if everything is just written, decreed upon us without any of us having any effect on it, without us having any say in it? Because if you think our will has no effect, you're basically saying we're robots. The Ash'aris, not the early Ash'aris. The later Ash'aris said, oh, there's a thing called mail. When the question was really pushed and they couldn't really come out of it, the issue of accountability, then the later Ash'aris came with the concept of mail, and they say, well, you don't really have there is no cause and effect. You don't your will doesn't have any effect. So it's basically you don't have a will, really. It's just an illusion. But there is a thing called mail, a leaning towards something. So you're leaning towards doing the good deed, or you're leaning toward doing the evil deed. Okay? And it's like, and like when you say, I'm thinking, and then something, just before something you do, you have a strong intention, just before you're about to do it, you're at the strongest point of intention. There are levels of intention. Azam is the strongest one, like you're now about to do it. They say it's that thing, it's before that stage. You're accountable for that. You're accountable for that thing. So the later actually became like what? What to read is in a sense. Like, okay, we'll explain it, but they still can't say that your will has an effect. You see, what's the problem with I saying that it destroys the whole philosophy of the Ash'ari creed, which is there is no cause and effect in the universe. Allah is the doer. Allah is a trigger all the time. Created beings cannot cause things to come into existence. Created things cannot have a will. created things cannot be efficient causes for effects. This is the philosophy. You believe in that, you destroy your philosophy. So the Ash'aris will never say that you have a will. They say, oh, so the term is something else. They say there's a male, there's a leaning. That's the later Ash'aris. So in a sense, it's pretty much after that, it becomes semantics now. If you go with the later Ash'ari, they like Maturidis really then. You don't want to call it will, but you want to call it male. A leaning. Okay? So some scholars term Ash'aris as moderate Jabris in this matter. But if you go classically, then they were proper Jabris then. Like your proper robots. Okay? Maturidis are most closest, right, to the Quran in this matter. Why? Because Allah says, and you do not will accept Allah wills. Indeed, Allah is over ever knowing and wise. وَمَا تَشَاءُونَ إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ. That you do not will accept that Allah wills. Meaning, Quran is affirming you don't will accept that Allah wills for it to happen. Meaning you do will, but only if Allah's will is with it. Meaning your will is subjugated by Allah's will. And the second ayah, for each one are successive angels before you and behind him who protect him by the decree of Allah. Indeed, Allah will not change the condition of a people until they change what is in themselves. What is that talking about? Allah will not change the state of a nation until they change what is in themselves. Of course, it's telling you that you have a will. Okay? And then Allah talks about reward and punishment and all that. That whatever you have done is what your hands have acquired. Many ayahs in the Quran. So what's more closest? Accountability, you're doing, you're being responsible. Quran, that's how Quran talk. So that's more close to the Maturidi view really, that your will is your doing really. So your will has an effect. And the misunderstanding regarding predestination stems from the apparent contradiction between predestination and Allah's justice. So firstly, Allah states in the Quran that man will be held accountable for the action he performs. That's given. He will be rewarded for the good that he does and punished for the evil that he does. So indeed, those who believe, do and do righteous deed and establish prayer and give charity, we will have their reward with their Lord. Quran is very clear. Secondly, Allah states that there is accountability for one's action, and whoever disobeys Allah and His Messenger and transgresses His limits will be admitted to the fire, and for them is a humiliating punishment. Thirdly, Allah also describes Himself in the Quran as being just, and Allah says, verily, Allah does not do injustice to mankind. Okay, and the Maturidis will link this to Allah's wisdom. You see, that out of Allah's wisdom, He doesn't do injustice. Fourthly, and you can't believe that Allah is unjust anyway. Again, it'll be considered as what? A deficiency. It'll be considered as a deficiency as per the Maturidi view. And firstly, therefore, since Allah is just, and man is held accountable for his actions, it is not possible for man to be compelled, as that would entail injustice. Aqlan speaking, right? Aqlan speaking. Hence, it necessitates that man is enabled with a will to choose his actions. However, the concept of predestination seems to negate man's free will. You see, when you think about Allah decreed everything already, and then some people think, but how is it possible that if Allah's already predestined everything, how can I change things? That's one confusion for some people. Okay? Then the Ash'aris is on a different line. The Ash'aris are on a different thinking. How can created things have a will? You see? So that's one confusion. And the apparent contradiction between predestination and free will has been a topic of debate among theologians throughout Islamic history. Let's now, and therefore there's been some efforts on trying to reconcile this. However, despite this effort, the relationship between predestination and free will remain a source of confusion for many today, and is frequently a source of problematic questions and doubts. I'm saying this is still a confusing area, this. Okay, let's go to some. Let me bring some slides which I'll break it down a bit more. And then we can leave it at that. Right. This is what we're going to do. Right. So that's easy. So number one is the problem of Allah's predestination of man's action, meaning Allah's decreed everything. Okay? It's going to go again, is it? So there. Let's look at this. So Allah decreed everything. So the two divine attributes of Allah, all-knowing and divine will, form the basis of the concept of predestination. So you're looking at him being on. Okay. Those two form the basis of predestination. Allah is all-knowing, He knows everything, and because He's all-knowing, therefore He willed for things to be as such, as we see them today. Okay? But let's go to the next point. So, Him being all-knowing. What does Allah say? Does the one who created not know? And Allah says many times, Innaka antal alimul hakim. Okay, He's all-knowing. Okay, so Allah says, since He is the creator of all things that exist and occurs, it is necessary for Him to be omniscient and all-knowing. Since Allah is the creator of all things, it is impossible for Him to be attributed with ignorance of anything. We've talked about this before already. Second thing is the creator, originator. He is the creator and originator, the source of everything in the universe, including the actions of the mankind. What does Allah say? Allah is the creator of all things. Allah created you and what you do. Even intellectually, we understand this. And Allah says that in the Quran as well. So they both agree, intellectually and textually as well. So what does that leave leave us with? Let's go to the next point here. Abu Lahab, for example, his case. We've got the two things, knowledge of Allah and the will of Allah. What do they together do? Predestination, right? We talked about. They form the basis of that. Now, let's take the case of Abu Lahab. He was presented with Islam. And then he rejected Islam, right? And then he did what? Did he have a chance to accept Islam? This is the whole thing we want to talk about. So number one stage, he was presented with Islam. But let's look at the knowledge of Allah. Allah knew he would refuse to accept even before He created him. At that point, when he was presented with Islam, Allah already knew Allah's knowledge. Will of Allah. Allah created His actions and pre-eternally will for them to occur. Since Allah knew He will reject it, Allah created His action of rejection. And meaning Allah will for them to come in action in the time, those actions. But He pre-eternally will for them to happen that way. Like we say, He ordered the pen to write everything. So on this day, on this date, on this year, this date, this action should be created. For example, this effect, who's the cause? Abu Lahab. The effect has been pre-eternally been created in Allah's knowledge. So the fact is already created. Okay? So Allah created. So this becomes predestination, right? Allah's knowledge, Allah's will. Okay, he rejected Islam. So again, according to Allah's knowledge, then it was inevitable that they would come to pass. How can it be that if Allah knows something, the opposite can happen to Allah's knowledge? Right? And then Allah created His actions and pre-eternally will for them for him to never accept Islam. Because Allah already knew. Okay, he rejected Islam. Again, that becomes another form of predestination, right? Based on when he rejected Islam. Then now, question is, did he have a chance to accept Islam now? Now let's read this. Now, it was not possible for Abu Lahab. Let's go. Let's look at this. It was not possible for Abu Lahab to make a choice contradict that. Is it possible for you to contradict Allah's knowledge? If Allah knew that Abu Lahab will never accept Islam, could he make another choice? Hold that thought. For it is impossible for the knowledge of Allah to be incorrect, and it is impossible for Allah to be ignorant of His creation. Okay, we understand this. If we say Abu Lahab had a choice in becoming the worst enemy, then Allah's will and knowledge must not truly encompass all. Now, if you say Abu Lahab had a choice in becoming the worst enemy, then Allah's will and knowledge must not truly encompass all things, since his actions were not determined by Allah. And if you say Abu Lahab had no choice in becoming the worst enemy, then can Allah truly be said to be just if He punishes Abu Lahab for the action is linked to it? If we say Abu Lahab had a choice in becoming the worst enemy, then Allah's will and knowledge must not truly encompass all things, since his actions were not determined by Allah. What they're trying to say is, Qadariyah and all that, is how can Abu Lahab make a choice which is outside Allah's knowledge? So, for example, read this again. If predicting what exists within Allah's knowledge, for it is impossible for the knowledge of Allah to be incorrect, and it is impossible for Allah to be ignorant of His creation. Now, having read this, Abu Lahab, if he had a choice, that would mean he's contradicting Allah's knowledge. Look, you see the spiral game here now. If he had a choice, it would mean he would be contradicting Allah's knowledge then. How can he contradict Allah's knowledge? So if you say that, then basically you're saying Allah is ignorant. So what's the other choice? He didn't have a choice. And that would keep Allah's knowledge intact and everything happening according to Allah's knowledge. So this is where Jabriism comes in. To save Allah from being labeled as, Bilal, ignorant, let's say, no, he didn't have a choice. Yeah, that's one, yeah? He didn't have a choice. Because if you say he had a choice, then in a way you're saying that Allah was ignorant. Allah is ignorant, and what happened is he's done something contrary to Allah's knowledge, really. When you say if he had a choice, did he have a choice? In a way you are trying to say that Allah is not aware. In a way, they're doing a reverse thing, that psychology. Because again, read this again. if he had a choice contradicting what exists within Allah's knowledge, you see the way the framing it is, did he have a choice in contradicting what exists in Allah's knowledge? You see, you can't frame it like that. Did he have a choice? That's it. We're not saying contradicting Allah's knowledge, but when you frame it like that in contradicting Allah's knowledge, then surely he doesn't have a choice. But Allah's knowledge is not, because there's a will as well. Did Allah will for it to happen? Okay, Allah already knew what you would do, but he didn't force it upon you. Okay, but because he knew, therefore he willed it as such. But you can't frame it now by saying, since Allah knows now, so now can he go against his choice? No, can he go against his will? Sorry. Yeah, what we're saying in the beginning is Allah knows because He's the creator, He's the all-knower. Not because He's been framed in a different way. Is it possible to go against Allah's knowledge? Is it possible for you to make a choice which is not in Allah's knowledge? Of course, we don't say that, but it's the angle they come at from, and then because of that, or did Abu Lahab have a choice to go again to make a choice against Allah's what's already in Allah's knowledge? If you say yes, you've made Allah's knowledge deficient. If you say no, you've made it look like a suppression. You see both? So you need a middle ground. But guess what happened? Some took those opposite spectrums of this discussion, whereas the others, they came to the middle ground and tried to address it. Okay, let's go. Now let's see how they looked at it. The two extreme groups. So let's see, where are we? So we can magnify this a bit. The two extreme groups of Qadariyya say they prioritize absolute free will then. Okay. They said Allah to disobey Him and then punishing them for His action is an impossibility. Aqlan. If Allah is just, then punishing them for compelling is not really on. Allah will not be doing such a thing. It is not possible for Allah to will that mankind commit evil despite commanding them against it. Why would Allah will for evil when He commanded them to do good? Right? The actions of human beings are pre-eternally known to Allah, but are not willed and created by Him. They're basically decoupling Allah with the action of the creations. Therefore, the action of the man are therefore his own, created by him, independent of Allah's will. They just went on that track. What did they prioritize? The justice of Allah. So therefore, to maintain the justice of Allah with Allah's actions and Allah's wills. Man does independent of Allah's will. He's responsible. By doing that, you don't attribute evil to Allah. There you go. And then also, what do? You maintain accountability, justice. That what you do, you're accountable for. And therefore, Allah is not labeled as being unjust. You don't attribute evil with Allah. You don't attribute injustice to Allah according to their approach. The other spectrum was what? Jabris. Absolute determinism, where they've gone with absolute free will, where Allah, the will, has no say in your actions. They've gone the opposite, the Jabriya. Jabr means oppression. In the case of Abu Lahab, they say Abu Lahab, if he had free will upon hearing the message of Islam, both acceptance and rejection of it would have been possible, right? If he had free will, then he would have had a choice to accept it or reject it. Therefore, they say, but you know what? Since Allah pre-eternally knew what Abu Lahab would reject the message, it was necessary for him to make that choice. Look how they're framing him now. Since Allah already knew Abu Lahab would reject, it is now obligatory for Abu Lahab to make that choice, but no other choice. Okay? And still all right, but look now, what do they say? The alternative is that what? That he had multiple possible options to freely choose from. Apparently affirms the possibility of the knowledge of Allah to be incorrect and for Abu Lahab to act apart from Allah's will. The same point I was making before. If you are not going to say the alternative that is he did have a choice, then what you're trying to say is Allah's knowledge fluctuated. It's not in Allah's knowledge what choice he is to make. But basically, they are going backwards here. So they're basically saying that since Allah already knew, it's obligatory for him to make the choice of rejecting Islam. But if you say he did have a choice of not rejecting Islam, then in a way it affirms the possibility of the knowledge of Allah to be incorrect, because he could do what? A or B. So Allah's knowledge is what? A or B. You see, when they're saying when you bring the aspect of will into it, okay, they're saying it brings ambiguity and it makes Allah's knowledge A and B as well. But this is when they took the extreme view, right? So therefore, compulsion of a man is what? Necessary. Okay, that's what they say. Although the human being has the illusion of a free will, in reality he is compelled to act in accordance with Allah's will and knowledge. Man's free will would necessitate the availability of multiple possible choices man may take in any given situation. But since his choices and actions pre-eternally exist within Allah's knowledge and occur only by his will, he is necessarily restricted to a single option. You see, they're saying, since Allah knows everything, in reality, what's going to happen is what he knows. And in reality, you only have one choice. You don't have a choice. You see how they're framing it? It's perspective here. So they've gone the other extreme end there. And therefore, this is why Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah come in the middle. The middle approach. Because Allah is just, Qadariyah, justice, right? The pre-eternal compulsion of the action of the human being would negate the concept of accountability. So we can't go with absolute determinism, because if we say that, that would really negate the concept of accountability. Where's the choice? It is also impossible for something to occur independently of the will and creation of Allah. To argue otherwise is to contradict the unequivocal verses of the Quran, which state that Allah wills and creates all things, including our actions. It should also be noted that the argument for determinism assumes that the knowledge and will of Allah precedes the choice of the individual in a temporal sense. You see, this is the key. Likening Allah to the creation. Because they couldn't snap out of that kind of mentality. They think Allah will now, there's the sequence of things. This is false. Since time is merely a creation of Allah, He and His attributes, including His knowledge and His will, transcend it, transcend sequence. Okay? He is not subject to time, past, present, future, like the rest of the creation. You know, you think Allah will, Allah will know first, and then His will kind of thing. It's sequential. No, Allah is free from those kind of sequences. Okay? And to think, oh, Allah will only know when the creation does something. No. Again, you're thinking of Allah like a creation. Not Allah is all-knowing, independent of time, space. Okay? If you're going to put human standards on Allah, then that's how you're going to think. Oh, because the human took a choice, now Allah knows. You see, Allah is free of time. He was always the all-knower, and He always will be the all-knower. No fluctuation, no change in His knowledge. Okay, so again, applying human standards to Allah, that also gives problems. Therefore, hence Ahl-Sunnah believe that the correct way to understand the choice and the actions of the human being is to be found between these two groups. And therefore, the conclusion is, although Allah's predestination of man's actions may appear to contradict the existence of man's own free will, close analysis of the matter reveals that this is not the case. The two premises can be reconciled without limiting the omniscience and the will of Allah, or the free will of a man, which is the source of his accountability. The omniscience and the will of Allah do not compel individuals with regard to their actions. Rather, His omniscience and His will create the actions of the man to correspond with man's freely willed choices. That's how we understand this. That's that. I think that's on that one. And then if we go to the a bit more detailed now, but that's just kind of an overview. And let's quickly go through this one. This is a bit more complex one, but let's go through it. Let's look at some terminologies first before we do anything. Terminologies. Preponderance without a case, infinite regression. Okay, we've done this, right? The universe transitioned from a state of non-existence to a state of existence. Therefore, the existence of the universe is what? Merely possible, isn't it? It's a possible thing, because it's not a must, because it didn't exist at one point. Someone brought it into existence. And we've gone through all the things that prove that the world is merely a possible thing. It's not an impossible thing because it's already in existence, which shows you the balance has been tipped from non-existence to existence by a trigger. Now, since the universe is merely a possible entity, it is in need of an external cause to exist. Otherwise, how did it come into existence? Now, this external cause must be a necessary existence. Why? Because otherwise, either of the two impossible scenarios would have occurred. Infinite regression. He created him, he created him, he created him, he created him. Where's it going to stop? It has to stop at someone for it to shoot, right? Remember the example of the shooting the arrows. Not until you put stop and there's a beginning. You put stop and then, okay, this is the final trigger. And then you put stop to infinite regression, then something really happens. Theoretically, abstract-wise, yeah, infinity exists as a mathematical concept. But for things to come into existence in reality, infinite regression will never work. It'll keep going on, and the first person can never shoot until someone at the end of the chain finally creates. You put stop to it. Otherwise, it'll keep going on, and this person here is just waiting. Like, when is the domino impact going to hit me? Well, it's not, because it's just going on over there in infinity. Never happens. But the fact that something happens, it means there has to be a stop there on that infinite chain. Okay? So, if you don't believe that there's a necessary existence, which is the stop to the chain, then it means infinite regression. Infinite regression will never bring things into existence. Or preponderance without a cause. So remember, things are either impossible, possible, and there's a must thing, right? It has to exist like Allah. Then things are impossible or possible. An idea in your mind is possible, impossible. What's going to bring it into existence? Preponderance. Preponderance over non-existence. How is it going to happen? By a trigger, right? It needs an external source, external trigger to bring it to do preponderance, but it has to be a cause. Something that doesn't exist cannot be the cause for itself yet, right? So otherwise you'll be saying that otherwise you'll be implying infinite regression, which is not possible, or you'll be implying preponderance over non-existence into existence without a cause, which again is not a possibility. There has to be a cause. Okay, let's okay, number one. A merely possible mumkin entity is the one whose existence is not rationally necessary. It may exist, it may not exist. This means it is not rationally necessary for it to exist, nor is it rationally impossible for it to exist. Rather, it is merely possible for that thing to exist. An example of a merely possible entity is the universe. It is rationally possible to conceive of its existence and non-existence. If an entity whose existence is merely possible is non-existent, then its existence requires what? An external cause. That's a given. Number two, an external cause, we call it a murji or mukhassis. An external cause, in this case, is a cause other than the merely possible entity that causes it to exist. It can't be the thing itself. This external cause is necessary for the merely possible entity's existence because on the proverbial scale, existence, non-existence, and how the balance is tipped, non-existence is preponderant over existence. What's the default? Non-existence. Until the cause comes, brings into non-existence. Yeah, the default is that. It is not possible for existence to gain preponderance over the non-existence without what? An external cause. This leads to impossible case of preponderance without a cause. You can't imagine now preponderance without a cause. If the external cause is also a merely possible entity, then its existence also requires what? An external cause. If the sequence of causes is only composed of possible entities, then this would lead to a state of infinite regression or a never-ending sequence of causes. Number three, therefore, the case of preponderance without a cause, okay, we call it al-tarjih bila murjih, with respect to the existence of the possible entity is an impossibility, therefore. Okay, the case of preponderance without a cause with respect to the existence of a possible entity is an impossibility. This is because the alternative is that the possible entity caused itself to exist. This is not possible because in order for it to cause anything to occur, it must first be existence itself. If it's not existing itself, how can it be the cause of its own existence? Okay? It is not possible for something non-existent to be a cause. Because that thing which is non-existent is what? Requires what? a cause for its own existence. It requires a cause for its own existence. And if there are many possible things, so if this was caused by this possible, if this was caused by this possible thing, this was caused by this possible thing, each one of them requires what? A cause. Who's the ultimate cause? And this is why they actually say created things cannot be efficient causes. Because who's the real cause? Allah, really. Allah caused, and then everything trickled through. That's how we see it. Okay? But according to them, this cause effect doesn't exist anyway. That's why they say created things cannot be efficient causes. This is what actually they're getting to anyway, when we're looking at this. Infinite regression or a never-ending sequence of causes is an impossibility. We've discussed this already. This is because the existence of an actual infinite in reality is impossible. An infinite cannot exist in reality. As a mathematical concept, it exists. In reality, X number of shooters, number one can never shoot until you put a stop to the chain of shooters. If you let it go infinitely, number one can never shoot. Meaning number one's action will never come into existence. Therefore, the world would have never come into existence. Okay? The proof offered for the impossibility of the existence of an actual infinite by theologian is the following. Oh, look at this now. They're going to go through numbers. And sometimes I get it, sometimes I don't get it, because it depends on my mind as well, the state of it when I'm teaching. Right? But let's look at it. Okay. Assume there is a series of numbers that continues infinitely. And another series that also continues to infinity, but starts with one number after. Okay? So if the first series is 1, 2, 3, okay, let's look at this. 1, 2, 3. Then what? Infinity, right? That's the first line. Then the second series starts from what? 2, 3, right? Then the second series is 2, 3, 4, and so on. If the two series are aligned either way, they will be equal to one another or not. Will they be equal to one another or not? Now, let's look at the scenarios. If they are equal, yeah, this means that the part of something is equivalent to the whole of it. Now, if you say these two are equal, that's scenario first. They're equal. Then what you're saying is the part of something is equivalent to the whole of it, as the second series is subset of the first, which is impossible. Basically, what you're saying is if they are equal, you're saying, did we miss something out here? One. What you're saying then is a part what you're saying is omitting something from here, from there, it has no difference, right? Or that's equal to the whole of it, right? Okay. Right? Look at this. If they are equal while omitting the first one from there, then what you're seeing is, logically speaking, is this a subset of this? It's a subset, isn't it? It's a subset. What does it make? It makes it a part. This makes it a part. So let me go back. A part of this, isn't it? Is that correct or not? Because you omitted one, now it's made it a subset, and that becomes a part of this. Logically, can a part be equal to the whole? Okay. So this is what he's saying, which is what? Impossible. It's an impossibility. Second scenario. If the two series are not equivalent, which is what we are saying, right? Logically. And the first is larger than the second, meaning this one here is larger than the second one, then the second is not never ending. The second one is what? Let me look at this again. This is what I was saying. I have to rethink about when I'm doing this. If the two series are not equivalent, and the first is larger than the second, the first is larger than the second, then the second is not never ending. Okay, what was the point here? Let me think. Then the second is not never ending. Okay, the point here being made is and the first is larger than the second. Okay. Okay, logically, are we okay with that? If the first is bigger than the second, then what? Then the second is also what? Never ending, right? Never ending. Now, if the second has an end, okay, and the first is only 1 unit greater than the second. Now, if you're saying the second has an end, okay, and the first one is only 1 unit greater than the second, because how much did we omit? This one. This one, okay. And the first is not never ending either. How do you explain that? So if we say now, if the second has an end and the first is only 1 unit greater than the second, because they're non-ending, then this first is not never ending either. Right, the point being made here now is quickly. Okay, let me see. If the second has an end, and the first is only 1 unit greater than the second. Okay, that's what he's saying basically. Right, let's go back to the first one. You see, I said it takes a while because I don't revise, and then when I'm teaching it, it takes a while for it to kick back in. Right, the point being made. Okay, now let's go back to the second. If the two series are not equivalent, we've already established that because it's impossible for a subset to be greater than, or for a part to be greater than the whole. If that's the case, then the two series are not equivalent, right? They're not equivalent. And the first is larger than the second because it's got one less, right? Then the second is not never ending. Why?
Because it'll never be as big as the first one.
How can you? What we're saying is, if the two series are not equivalent and the first is larger than the second, because because this is a subset of the first, yeah. Then the second is not never ending. Why is it saying the second is not never ending?
Because it's a subset. So the first one had the original one, the second one's been created.
It's been created. It's a subset. It's a subset. And how can a subset be created if you don't have an end to it? You gotta know. You gotta know what the subset is now. When you make something a subset, it has to have an end to it. It has to have an end to it. It's a subset. It can't be infinite now. If it's a subset, you've taken a subset over there. So a subset, you have to know what the subset is now. So you have to put an end to it. So it's 1, 2, 3. You see, you have to define it now, basically. It's a subset. Okay? And this is why it's saying, now if the second has an end, the fact that now you put an end to the second one, because it's a subset, and the first one is only 1 unit greater than the second, then the first is not never ending either now. Now, the fact that you're comparing numbers, you have to put an end to it. You can't compare now. If this is a subset, this also is going to be something with an end to it. Okay, you can only compare when you put an end to it. I can't say now the fact that this is now a subset here, I've chunked it up now. It's 1 to whatever. It's not really, because I'm comparing now. It's a subset. So when it's a subset, you have to define it now. And we know that the part can never be greater than the whole. So now because it's a subset, now you're comparing the subset. Now when you're comparing, how can you compare? You have to put ends to it. Otherwise, infinity will not give you anything comparison-wise. But we already established that if you omit one, they're not the same. They're not the same. Okay? Infinity, okay? You say now, okay, I'm omitting one, and then this one is less. So logically, a part now cannot be greater than the whole. Okay? But now to compare them, it's a subset now. How do we compare them? You have to put an end. You have to put an end to them. Otherwise, you cannot compare them. But we've already established by the first one, a subset cannot be greater than the whole. And when they can't be greater than the whole, then when you're comparing them, there has to be an end. You can't compare infinite things because they will never exist really in reality. But the point being made is, for it to become a subset now, then what will happen is you've put an end to it by saying it's a subset. Now you defined it. It's become a piece. It's become a part. Part is never greater than the whole. That's a given. Now, two infinite things. One is one less, one is greater. And if now you're saying 1 is less by one number, what have you done to it? When you say 1 is less by one number, you've already okay. If 1 is less by only one number, this, what have we done? And you put an end to it. You cut it off. Okay, that's the only way you can compare it. So that's the kind of the point being made over there with the. We gave the other example, like remember last time, the point of the shooters. 1 can't shoot if 2 shoots, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But this example is of numbers. This is an example of numbers showing you infinite regression is not possible with the real things. Okay, so back to the same point here, which is the exact point in wording. Let me take it out again. Because the existence of an actual infinite in reality is what? Impossible. The existence of an actual infinite in reality is impossible. Mathematically, you can say infinite, that. But for something to infinity to exist, an infinite object to exist in reality, is impossible. When you're comparing numbers, 1 less is 1 less. You've already defined it. Okay, you've already defined that 2 things are in parallel, number series, and 1 is less. Yeah, then 1 has to be, 1 is a part of it really. It can't be equal. Because if you say they're equal, 2 infinite things, and 1 starts from 1 and 1 starts from 2, and they're both infinite and they're both equal, you've defied logic here. You said a part is equal to the whole, which is an impossibility. And if you so once you define that, once you establish that, then you say, okay, so 1 has to be equal or greater than the other. We already know the part is lesser than the whole. Okay, so if he says 1 less, how can he say it's 1 less when you put a stop to it? We've already defined it's 1 less, then you're already kind of saying, okay, it's not really infinite now. So I've got 1,000 apples. I've got 999 apples. Okay, you put an end to it. But can you have infinite apples sitting here? Okay, when you start comparing now, an infinite object cannot exist in reality. Only a finite object exists in reality. Infinity is only a mathematical abstraction. So that's what being said here. That's one thing about, basically this is all about, can something exist without a cause? No. Can something which is a possible entity be the cause of itself to come into existence? No. Can something exist in reality which is infinite? No. That's just all to do with that. So we understand these. Then there's another thing called Amuri Tabariya. That's one thing. These are concepts that are formulated in the mind but do not exist outside of it. They exist in the mind, but in reality, they don't exist. Experimental reality, they call them. An example of this is the concept mentioned before of an entity being merely possible. Think of anything. Come on, Ikhlas, think of anything. Dragon. Does it exist? It does not exist. It's just in your mind, right? It may not exist in reality. It's amur i'tibari. You're just considering it. I'tibari means to consider it in your mind. Okay? The entity being described with possibility may exist. However, the concept of possibility, as explained earlier, is formulated in the mind. It's an experimental reality. Okay? but does not enjoy an extra mental existence. So it's just a mental reality. Sorry, I misused the word. It doesn't enjoy an extra mental reality, meaning a real reality. It's a mental existence, but beyond the mind, extra mental reality, it doesn't enjoy that. When we say extra mental reality, like dragon exists, Amure Tabari, it's a mental reality. Does it have an extra mental reality beyond the mind? Does it really exist? May or may not exist. This is what they consider to be as Amur. Amur means Amar mean matters, which are considered by the mind, which the mind considers, but they may not enjoy an extra mental reality. That's another term. Okay? And another term is hal, which the theologians use. So these are things that the theologians use. We're just doing terminology, and we're going to leave it at terminology today. Oops, we got big on time. A mode is an attribute that is not existent, nor is it non-existent. Rather, it is an intermediary mode between the two. It's not inexistent, neither it is not existent. It's an intermediary state between the two. The affirmation of the mode has been a point of contention among theologians, the majority of whom negate it. They just negate. There is no such thing like that, they say. Okay. To better understand this concept, consider the example of a knowledgeable individual who has the attribute of knowledge residing in him. Those who affirm modes would say that there are three matters involved in this example: the individual, the attribute of knowledge, and the state of being knowledgeable that resides in the individual. This state is referred as to mode, the state of being knowledgeable. Knowledge, the individual, knowledge, and the state of being. And most of the theologians say there is no such thing as the state of being knowledgeable. It's individual and knowledge. They exist. There is no such thing as in between. Okay? So these things are going to be used in our discussion up here now. Right? We're going to go up here next week and we're going to discuss these things. If you want to catch up the slide, the PDFs are there anyway. If you want to just go through this second slide, it's called Free Will Design 2. If you want to just go over it, just read up a bit, but we are going to go through that next week, inshallah. Gone over time. Okay. Take a quick. We'll start at 3:15, inshallah, if you want to.
Ustadh, just before you finish, sorry. If you've been assigned will and qadar as your exam topic, it's a very big area. What are we looking to revise and cover within 5 minutes? Is it just an overview of the positions on free will?
Yeah. Overview of the position and describe as best as you can.
Okay, perfect.
Describe as best as you can in 5 minutes. Yeah. So you probably like bring things like that I mentioned, but you don't have to go in detail, but just say there's this, and some say this and some say that, without going too deep into, like, I don't want you to be explaining this diagram, for example, but I want you to kind of take key concepts out, key terminologies, and refer to them, I would say. Any questions? I know this is hair splitting, but don't worry too much. Like I said, this is Kalam, and this does actually puzzle people, confuse people in early studies. So I thought I'll just bring it up, explain as the best as I can. And if you get even part of it, it's good enough. If you get the whole thing, then even better. But it does take time. Like I was explaining this number thing, sometimes it just takes a while to kick back in as well. So it's one of those things. You just have to know and just understand it well, and hopefully you can stay clear of confusion. Next week, inshallah, we'll go through the rest, and then we'll wrap it up with what should our understanding be and how it should be on this issue. It's a big issue. It does confuse people out there, but having a solid understanding, I think, is important on this issue. If no one's got any questions, inshallah, we can take a quick break and then we start with Tajweed, inshallah.